Hi, I'm Elaine Holden, and welcome to Education Matters here on Channel 96, Nashua, New Hampshire. Thank you for joining me today. You know, I often think about different topics to discuss with my viewing audience, and today I would like to share with you an experience that I had at a school meeting. This was before COVID, but I can pretty much guarantee you that post-COVID hasn't made any changes. This was a very concerning meeting for me. It was a second grade child. This particular child was not reading. If you have been following this show, you know that I stated last week that according to the New Hampshire Department of Education website, 51% of the fourth graders here in New Hampshire are reading below grade level. That's a pretty startling number. We know that the greatest predictor of third and fourth grade reading failure is reading failure in the first grade. We also know that the research is very clear that if a child is not decoding words by Christmas of first grade, that child needs intervention. So with all that information that has been out there for a long time, I was quite startled when I attended this meeting, and I was asked to come by the parents as a consultant. I said I was perfectly happy to do this. And so we were all sitting around a table and we're discussing the difficulties that this little guy was having. He couldn't understand the sounds, the phonemes of the language. He could not decode the words as a result. It looked as if he was experiencing attentional problems because let's face it, if you're having trouble doing something and you're really struggling, how much attention can you pay? As an adult, probably a little bit more, but as a little child of 7.5, not much at all. So this child was struggling in school, had been struggling all through first grade, and now into second grade, still struggling, still not reading. And the parents were concerned, and so we had this meeting, and I helped the parents prepare for it. And we were all sitting around the table, and the teacher finally said, "I know exactly what's wrong with him." And we all were like, "Okay, what?" And she said, "He's a late bloomer." And we all sat there and said, "What?" And she said, "He is a late bloomer." And I made the mistake of saying, what makes you say that?" And she went to her desk and took out a book and said, "See, it's right here." Now, if you're a parent or a grandparent, you know this book. It's called Leo the Late Bloomer. And it's a great book. It's by Robert Krause, and the illustrations are by a great artist named Jose Arguello. This book has been in publication probably 50 years. And this book talks about this little tiger, and his name is Leo. And he can't read and he can't write, and some people say Leo's not too bright. There's a rumor in the jungle that Leo's a late bloomer. And the story goes on, and it's an adorable story, and parents and grandparents and caregivers love to read this story. I love to read this story to children. It's a story that's a classic. It's a story that has been around, as I said, for many, many years, and it has remained in print because it's such a great children's story. And I emphasize children's story because this is not based on reading research. This is a kid's story designed to entertain children. So I said, why do you even look at this when in fact, and I'm going to hold up now reading research. What is this? This is the publication of the National Reading Panel. Look at the size of this, okay? We got over 400 pages of reading research. This was published in 2002, so it's 20 years old. And the research subsequent to this publication reinforces the results of the research in this publication. There are pillars to reading, the first pillar being phonology, awareness of the 45 sounds. The second pillar being associating those sounds to the various symbols, the alphabet, and all the configurations, the 45 what we call phonograms, okay? So I've got the reading research, and she's got Leo the late bloomer. Now, I want to know how on earth she's using Leo the late bloomer as a justification for explaining why this child can't read. At which point she tells me, well, I went to a workshop. Okay, I'm trying to sort this out now. Well, it turns out that the school district had hired an individual from an organization that does staff development to come in and do a day-long workshop for the teachers. So let me back up and explain what this is all about. Teachers have to get something called clock hours. They have to have so many clock hours every 3 years in order to get recertified, to renew their license. Now, in my case, most of my licensing is from the state of New York, and I have to re-up my licensing every year. That's just a requirement of the licenses that I hold. And yeah, I hold New Hampshire licenses as well, but my big licenses are in New York, and the requirements are pretty strict. So you have to go to these different workshops, you have to take seminars, you have to take classes, college classes, whatever. Doesn't matter what level you're at educationally, you still have to get your clock hours to stay current. Well, school districts also understand that many teachers are not particularly vigilant in getting their clock hours. So they have something called staff development days. And it's required of teachers. It's part of their contract. So teachers attend these staff development meetings for the length of the day, say 8 to 3 or 9 to 3 or whatever, so that you have so many hours built in. And they have them periodically throughout the year and also at the beginning of school before school starts. So if you add those hours up, generally it comes to the amount of hours pretty much, more or less, that teachers need in order to get recertified. So the school districts help teachers get those clock hours so that they can get recertified every 3 years. Fine, okay. So you have a staff development committee, and the staff development committee is usually made up of teachers, perhaps department chairs, and school administrators. And they make a decision based upon, hopefully, the needs of the teachers and the input from everybody to decide who to hire to go in front of this group, usually the entire staff for the school district, and do a staff development workshop, usually a half day or a full day, many hours, one way or the other, so that they get their staff development time in, build up those clock hours, keep track of it, get their certifications, and then they can go for their license renewal with no difficulty. And everybody signs off on it, and it's pretty formal. But essentially what they're doing is helping these teachers get those staff development hours, those clock hours. So now we get back to who they hire. Ideally, we would like to have somebody providing current information to teachers and school administrators based on research, real research, just research, and nothing else. Not, this is what I think, this is how it should be, maybe if we tried this or we tried that. No, it has to be based on research. Because if teachers want to be treated as professionals, they should be getting professional information. Professional information means that you have research behind it. If a doctor is going for staff development hours, doctors have to keep up on a lot of areas. And so they go in to these various seminars and they learn about new techniques in surgery or new techniques for treating various illnesses. It's not somebody training them with a, this is what I think we ought to do, or maybe if we tried this, that will happen. It's, here's the research, here's all of the data, here's the information you need, here's the technical stuff. Dentists have the same expectations. When they go into a seminar, it's how to handle something in a very new way that is research-based. What about lawyers? Well, lawyers go to seminars all the time, and it has to do with case law, keeping very, very current. Pretty much any profession. Tax people, accountants, have to keep up with the current taxes. Not what they think the tax laws should be, but what the tax laws really are. Every single profession does this. The guy that works on my car has to go to seminars to learn how to deal with the new computers under the hood. Because if he's 3 years behind, he can't fix my vehicle. This is what I'm talking about. So here you have a group of supposedly well-educated professionals who are teaching our children, and you get some guy in front of them on a stage being very entertaining, and this charlatan, instead of pulling out the real research, comes up with Leo the late bloomer and says, well, it's not a problem because these children are just late bloomers. Here, let me read you this story. And this charlatan, and I'm using the word very carefully because this is somebody that takes tax-paying dollars, your dollars and my dollars. That's what supports our schools. He's taking tax-paying dollars and going around the country, and this isn't just one individual, believe me, there are a lot of them out there. People make good money with this, doing staff development. And so here they are, using Leo the late bloomer or some other little book and saying these children are just late bloomers. So you don't have to worry about it. They'll get it eventually. They'll grow into it. What have I said in weeks past? When somebody says, let's wait and see, if you wait, what you see will be a child in failure. Going back to the doctor model, if a child comes in with a pain in the side and a high fever, and the doctor suspects appendicitis, the doctor doesn't say, let's wait and see. If a dentist has a patient come in and there's pain and infection, it looks like an abscess, the dentist doesn't say, let's wait and see. If you have an accountant or a tax lawyer and you come in with a letter from the IRS and the tax lawyer or the accountant reads it, they're not going to say, let's wait and see what happens. They're going to deal with it right now. So why on earth would we have a let's wait and see model based upon this child is just a late bloomer? And if we wait, we'll see that everything works out okay. According to the research sponsored by the United States government, let's wait and see doesn't work because, as I just said, what you see if you wait is a child in failure. We cannot go around hearing this child is a late bloomer because, one, it blames the child, basically. It states quite simply that if you just wait, everything will be fine. And yet we know that's not the case. How many times have we seen children slide through elementary school not being able to read and somebody saying, well, let's wait and see. And this reinforces it. These Leo the late bloomer people who get thousands, and I mean thousands of dollars to do staff development are doing a tremendous disservice to our children. And you know what? They're doing a tremendous disservice to our teachers as well. If our teachers expect to be treated as professionals, they as professionals need to demand that they get professional information, that they get information that is research-based that they can apply in their classrooms. And that doesn't mean that they turn around and they get some kind of little cute dog and pony show and they're entertained for a few hours. Staff development should not be entertainment for a few hours. Staff development should be pretty hard, pretty fast, and pretty clearly related to the research. And I cannot emphasize enough how many times I have seen staff development programs that are very, very basic, very simple. And I've heard negative stuff about teachers, and the statement is, well, they really can't handle anything more. What does that say to us? What does that say to our teachers? What does that say about our teachers? To get back to my little second grader that I was very concerned about, that the parents were very concerned about, I had to very clearly say, I reject the idea that he is a late bloomer. If a child does not show himself or herself to be progressing along that continuum, that means that that child needs intervention. We know that from the research, the hard and fast scientific research. This gets back to reading readiness versus school readiness. Those are two different things. A child can be ready for school. The child can separate easily from the parent or caregiver without crying and having a tantrum. The child makes friends easily, plays nicely on the playground, shares, behaves well in class. That child can be very, very ready for first grade. But that child can also be not ready to read in the sense that that child does not have the foundation skills necessary to encounter print successfully. That means the child needs to have direct instruction, not be labeled a late bloomer. The expectation for a so-called late bloomer is that eventually the late bloomer, on his own or her own, will be just fine. They will grow into the process. They'll grow into their age bracket. And that may be socially, it may be physically, but it is not related to reading. You don't have late bloomers in reading. We know that a child is expected to develop his or her phonological skills completely by the end of second grade. We also know that if those phonological skills are not progressing along that expected continuum, that child needs to have intervention early and often, because without that intervention, that child will remain behind. And those are the kids that drop out of school. Those are the kids that require special education. Those are the kids that many times get eventually put into different schools simply because they don't have the ability to maintain with their classmates. And it all folds back into not being able to read. So my point here is this whole business with staff development. Staff development should provide teachers with the research that they need to be able to understand the type of intervention that is appropriate to teach reading. Reading is my thing. We know that I've been saying the same thing about mathematics for a long time. So it's not just reading, it's also mathematics. But the bottom line is we have data that's very clear, that's on a base of over 210,000 children, that says, here's the research. We need structured literacy. We need intervention if a child has difficulty in phonology. They have to have direct instruction. It has to be systematic. It has to be direct. And here's the research to explain why. And these are the types of things, it's the research first, and then here's how you do it second, that needs to happen in staff development. It needs to happen early and often for teachers, because teachers are coming into the classrooms not knowing how to teach these children, because they're not getting it in the colleges and universities. And you know, the claim that is made by the college professors that these students can't handle it makes me concerned for who's doing the accepting in the first place. Because if these students cannot handle the workload or the level of intensity of required information reading, basically, of the research and the expectations, they shouldn't be there in the first place. You know, I understand accepting a lot of students in because they've got to keep the doors open, but at the same time, there does have to be sort of a baseline of who gets accepted and who doesn't. In all honesty, okay? We sometimes see too many children or young people being accepted to college that maybe need to have a different career path. But in any case, once they're there and once they've graduated, once they're working with children, they need to get the research, and then they need to get the actual skills taught to them as to how they teach the subject of reading. And to have these charlatans going out there and showing them books such as Leo the Late Bloomer. I love Leo the Late Bloomer, as I said. But this is not research. This is not a justification for labeling a child a late bloomer and just saying, just leave him alone. He'll be fine eventually. He'll get it. He's not going to get it. The children won't automatically get it. They're not going to grow into the process. They need to be taught. The job of childhood is learning to read. And people need to teach these children how to do their job. How many of us have had to be taught how to do our jobs? We didn't just walk into our jobs and say, boy, I know how to do this. I have family members that work on various machines in a machine shop. These machines are highly sophisticated. They have very big manuals. This piece of reading research, as far as thickness goes, is nothing compared to the manuals for some of those machines, which is about twice the size of that book. Those manuals have to be understood, have to be learned, and the operation of those machines has to be taught directly. And that's not easy. So when you have people operating machinery, they have to have really a rigorous protocol for instruction, because these machinery pieces, these big machines are maybe worth $250,000, $500,000. We don't take those things lightly. We have to make sure that they are well treated and well maintained and operated properly. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you most likely have had to be taught directly on how to do what you're doing. It's the same with children. Children need to be taught directly how to read, in which case you have to have the people teaching them trained properly. And that staff development is called in-service training. Pre-service training is what they are getting in colleges. You would think that the college professors would be doing the right instruction. We know that in less than 10% of the cases in the entire United States, we have the correct instruction on how to teach reading. Less than 10% of the colleges and universities. The rest aren't doing it, not doing it the right way anyway, according to the research. So that means that instead of getting it in the pre-service, they have to get it in the in-service. And those staff development programs are designed to do the in-service training. And when these charlatans are hired to do the in-service training, and they start saying it's not a problem, these kids are just late bloomers, you know there's an issue. And this is my point. We need to ensure, as taxpayers, that the staff development that is being done with our teachers is based on research, is something that teaches them how to teach the subject correctly, and has high expectations for teacher performance. And that folds back not just onto the teacher, but onto the school administrators themselves. And it folds back onto the staff development committees that hire these people. They can no longer get away hiring these charlatans and saying, really, just make sure they learn one little thing and it'll be okay. So you're spending all these hours being entertained, but not getting anything substantive. And this is wrong, because this does not help our children. And in fact, it denigrates our teachers as well, because it presumes that our teachers are not capable enough of learning this information and then going into the classrooms and applying it. And we need to do better than this. And we really need to know that when anybody, me, you, parents, whomever, walks into a meeting because they have concern for their child, that they're going to have teachers, one, telling them the truth, two, acknowledging that maybe this child does need help, and not trying to use the excuse that the child is a late bloomer and therefore we just wait and see and let them grow into it, because that's not reflective of research. And we need to reflect research. And this is my point. Well, I've actually made 2 or 3 points during this show. So we really have to, as taxpayers, as parents, grandparents, and concerned citizens, make a concerted effort to ensure that, one, as I said, we have adequate staff development, that staff development that we as taxpayers are paying for actually reflects current research, appropriate research, and once the research is fully understood by the teachers, the next step is for them to be completely trained in how to apply this correct research. And all of that makes the difference for our children. We have to decide, do we want the children to be labeled as late bloomers, ignored and allowed to fail? Or are we going to look at information from research, such as what we've seen from the National Reading Panel? And are we going to take this research, take it to heart, fully recognize what it says, admit that our children absolutely have to be taught to the research and not what somebody thinks, or just sort of, entertainment value for staff development? These are the things that we really have to pay attention to, because it's getting to critical mass out there. This is the real problem. Children, 51% of our 4th graders here in New Hampshire, below grade level in reading. This is not acceptable. And we have to start making changes right now, because we cannot afford to lose another generation. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you being with me. I will be with you again next week. This is Elaine Holden for Education Matters here on Channel 96, Nashua, New Hampshire.